The St. John's International Women's Film Festival is based in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. We respectfully acknowledge the land on which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, whose culture has been lost forever and can never be recovered. We also acknowledge the island of Uktamguk, Newfoundland, as the unceded, traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq. We acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Innu of Nitassinan, the Inuit of Nunatsiavut, and the Inuit of Nunatuavut. We recognize all First Peoples who were here before us, those who live with us now, and the 7 generations to come. As First People have done since time immemorial, we strive to be responsible stewards of the land and to respect the cultures, ceremonies, and traditions of all who call it home. As we open our hearts and minds to the past, we commit ourselves to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for all.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say that I'm really thrilled to get to have this conversation with you, Jordan, because I'm sure, as everyone knows, you're an incredibly talented director who's made 2 award-winning feature films that have shown internationally, as well as your contributions to several incredible TV shows like Baroness von Sketch and Schitts Creek and Fraggle Rock, Back to the Rock, which I can't wait to talk to you about. But also on a more personal note, I don't know if you remember, but when I was a teenager, and you're not much older than me, I was in the Women's Film Festival's framed filmmaking camp, and Jordan was a mentor. And I just remember being so in awe of how knowledgeable and confident you were, and also how generous as a mentor and hilarious. And that was a really powerful experience for me. So it's fun to get to pick your brain today.
Well, it's great to see you. Of course, I remember you. I was having breakfast with my friend earlier. I said, a girl I mentored in high school is interviewing me today. I'm going to feel so old, but oh, yeah.
Well, first, I wanted to begin by talking a little bit about We Were Wolves, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, and I know that you and Steve Cochran wrote the film together. He played one of the leading roles and you directed. And I'm just curious about what that process was like and how you kind of negotiated working on that project together.
Yeah. I mean, We Were Wolves kind of came out of this sort of time in my, well, it didn't even feel like a career at that time, but I had been making a lot of short films. I really wanted to make a feature. I had written another feature. I'd written 2 other features that were just too big. The budgets were just going to be too big for someone who'd never made one. And so it really came out of this moment of, I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait any longer. And so, yeah, Steve and I just started chatting about ideas and sort of writing for a place, which was Sam Price Phillips' cottage, our DP, and for actors that we wanted to work with, which was Steve, Peter Mooney, and Linda Boyd. So we kind of retrofitted this story in a way so that we knew we could make it in a short amount of time for a small amount of money and with a very, very pared down crew. So, we just, honestly, I can't remember exactly how it sort of, the initial idea sparked. I think we started talking about characters that Steve and Peter wanted to play, or sort of talking about, that brother dynamic and kind of coming up with a story that would allow them to be in this space together with all this kind of traumatic backstory to draw from, and just, work around, these 2 estranged brothers kind of stubbornly finding their way back to one another. And so, we just started, Steve and I started, I think we just kind of beat out the story a little bit. I remember sitting in his kitchen at one point in Toronto, and this is probably the only time I ever actually used index cards, but we had index cards up on his cupboard. And then we just kind of divvied it out. We sort of took chunks, sequences, and I was like, okay, Steve's going to write this chunk and I'll write this chunk. And then we just handed it back and forth. and if memory serves, I mean, this was a minute and a half ago now, but the writing process, from what I remember, went relatively quickly. You know, we wrote a first draft of the script, and, you know, I'm sure we tweaked it a bunch before we shot it, but it did come out of us pretty organically, which was great. And then it became about sort of, okay, literally how much, what is the minimal amount of money we need to make this possible? And then it was just about us, you know, starting to put that tiny little amazing team together and figuring out all the logistics of it. And I think both of us, I certainly kind of went into it thinking, okay, this is going to be a great experience. I'm going to make a feature. We're going to do this together with a bunch of people we love. If it's terrible, no one has to see it. You know, it's like, it'll be a great, you know, experiment, I guess. And then I do remember when we started shooting it, almost right away, we got to the island where, you know, Sam and I and Peter and Steve got there the first night before kind of the crew showed up the next day. And we did like, we just did like a sort of table read, sitting around the living room, reading it out loud and being there in the space. I did have a little sparkling of hope that like, oh, maybe this is going to be good-ish. Like maybe, you know, it won't be a total disaster. At the very least, it'll be an amazing experience, and we will all grow, you know, as artists going through this. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's amazing what like powerful, fully formed things can come out of going into a project with just wanting to make yourself a better artist. And obviously that collaborative chemistry was super important.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It really did also kind of set the bar for how I do like to work. You know, I really do like working with a co-writer or working with another writer and sort of developing a project together, as opposed to, like, I've written my own features, but I find that process much less pleasant than working with someone else.
And then Suck It Up was written by someone else, right? And you came in as the director on that.
Yeah, that amazing project just kind of landed in my lap. I really did feel like a kind of kismet universe delivering a gift to me at a time of need. Julia Hoff was the writer of that. She's one of my dear friends, and she had been developing it with the two lead actresses. They had kind of done a sort of like We Were Wolves model. They, you know, they wanted to work on something together. They wanted to create these characters. So they had sort of cooked up this great story idea and had gotten it to, you know, a first draft, or I don't know, a draft that they were sending out to people, and then needed a director. So someone at the CFC, I think, suggested me, and they got in touch, and yeah, it all just kind of, the material really, I really connected with the material. And yeah, then we took probably about a year, maybe a year and a half, developing that script. Julie and I kind of dug in together, and I mean, she was doing all the writing, but we just talked a lot about it, and we did a lot of workshops, and we workshopped it with Grace and Aaron, and just spent a lot of time. We had at one point thought we were going to shoot, I think we ended up shooting in like May of 2016. At one point we were like, we're going to shoot in October of 2015. And then it ended up, for a variety of reasons, we didn't. And I'm so glad it didn't, because we really took the next 6 months to keep pushing the script and digging deeper. And I think it made a big difference to the finished product.
It is there's some incredible dialogue in there. And
yeah, he's a great writer.
I thought there was interesting kind of thematic overlaps with We Were Wolves too, just in like the exploration of grief and grieving with others, and then gender and grief from these two different kind of perspectives. Which does any of that ring true to you?
Oh yeah.
What are those stories about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I do find it funny that the two main features I've made are like two people grieving in a cottage over someone who's died, and I swear I won't make a third one exactly like that, but
well, they're very different films also.
Yeah, but there's a lot to mine in that, you know, grief. I think when we were making We Were Wolves, also, you know, I was at a very different play. I had a very different experience to grief than I did when I was making Suck It Up. And so I did feel like I kind of had more to offer and more to explore when I was making Suck It Up. And it being about more so that that film was about the friendship. They were both grieving the loss of this man, but it was about the two of them, grieving the loss of their friendship and the wall that had kind of been built up between them, and that they both kind of laid bricks in, but didn't really know how to start dismantling until they're kind of forced into it together. And also I mean, Suck It Up is a funnier movie than We Were Wolves as well. Like Julia's hilarious, and obviously there's lots of very sad and intense moments in it as well. But I think tonally, we really wanted there to be that weird dark levity that kind of comes when you go through something horrible. Your sort of sense of what is funny and makes you laugh changes a little bit, and you can kind of find the levity and the I don't know, the weird silver linings in these really painful moments.
Yeah, I think you really capture that. And grief is so complex, and I feel like not explored as often as other kind of emotional states on the screen. It's a difficult one to tackle, I think. Yeah. So it's cool that you have approached it in these two different ways. I also wanted to ask, because before those two films, you made a lot of shorts, and then you moved into television. Are there kind of, how does it feel to work in all of those different genres? Are there freedoms that some offer and others don't? Are limitations?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think I have loved working in all, and I hope to continue working in like different genres and different mediums. It gets trickier in a weird way. It's gotten trickier over the years since I've started working in TV to get back to features and shorts. I mean, I think it's harder right now to make features in general, like in terms of funding and just the landscape of it in the country of how many are getting made and the options for that are possible. But yeah, I mean, I'm dying to make another feature, and I'm trying. I do try my best maybe not every year, but try every year to like do a small project. Like I just did this series of short sketches with Tim Baker a few months ago, which were so fun and dumb. And we had like no money. We shot them all over a weekend with a tiny crew, and it was, it really recharged my batteries. You've done this too. It's like when you're working with a bunch of your friends, doing something fun and silly with no money, and you're all just sort of pulling things together. It's so it's such a joyful experience. And working in TV is amazing, but it's certainly not that. You don't get that same kind of like, oh, I'll move this over here, and what can we do? I'll get some tape and throw this together. There's an enormous team and a lot of money and a lot of stakes, behind you. It is a big machine. So still making time to work on like little projects for fun is like a priority for me still, because it does recharge my batteries and just remind me like how much I love doing this and why I started doing it in the first place. So freedom wise, I mean, yeah, I think obviously, like, if you are the sort of shepherd of your own feature, a feature that you've either written or you've sort of carried along until production, or I guess if you had created your own show, there is definitely a sort of creative freedom that comes with that is different than being hired on a show as an episodic director doing a block of episodes. But they both have pros and cons. There's something great about coming into a show that's either already established or that you can help establish the look or tone or feel of, and then doing your episodes and then like getting out of there, and feeling like I brought my own flavor to this block of episodes. I did my best. I met some great people. I had fun. And now, Godspeed with the rest of the show. I don't need to work on this for 8 more months. I can just kind of go do a puppet show, or go do a sci-fi show, or go do a comedy, or go do a weird short film, the small bite chunks of it is pretty fun working in TV.
I wanted to ask you some more about the Tim Baker project, because I
Sure.
saw some of the promo material for that, and it looks really fun and hilarious. Like the tone of it is so funny.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it came out of, I mean, Tim and I have been friends since high school. He's the only person pretty much that will ever do music videos for. And we wanted to do a music video for his new album. And then there was just no money. Like we had this really highfalutin idea. It was very complicated. It was going to be very cool. Maybe someday we'll make it for a different song. But ultimately we kind of came up with this idea, and then his manager was like, you don't have any money for that. So, but it was a funny music video. Like I've been trying to pitch Tim on doing a Foo Fighters type music video since Hey Rosetta days. I was like, please, can we just get you guys doing characters? You're all so funny and goofy. Like, let's let the world know. So we were like, okay, well, we can't do that, but Tim still really wanted to do something funny. So yeah, they came up with this idea of, making these basically 30-second to 1 minute sketches that could kind of act as promotional material, out on social media in the lead up to the album coming out. So he got my partner, actually Adam, who's a writer from Baroness, to write these sketches. Him and Tim talked, and then he wrote 12 sketches. Tim acts in all of them, which is his dream. And then we just, cast the rest with amazingly talented comedians from here in Toronto that we know and love. My friend Alison Johnson produced them. My friend James shot it. We literally had 4 people on the crew, and we just shot it in the house was like Tim's bandmate's house. So we just shot it in there, and it was great. Yeah. So now they're all I think 7 of them are out now, and there's still 5 left to come out.
Cool. So you're releasing them kind of like each week, is that?
Well, I mean, I don't have any power of when they release them, but
okay.
Hypothetically, yes, they were supposed to kind of come out weekly. They could kind of released a bunch at the beginning, and now there's like a bunch. They're releasing them more frequently now because the album is coming out in a month. So
cool. That's interesting too. The kind of being able to play with the timeline a little. And is Tim playing himself? That's the impression that I got.
Yeah, well, he's playing like a kind of dumber version of himself. He's like, we sort of up like some of his quirks and foibles to make a slightly more elevated version of Tim. Yeah,
that's so great.
Yeah.
And then to talk a little bit about some of the work you've done in TV, I first was wondering if you could talk what it was like to move into that world, and if there were things that surprised you, and how did you break into TV?
Yeah, I mean, as I was sort of making shorts and features along the way, how I was making money was I was working as a script supervisor mostly in St. John's, and worked on first season of Doyle, and that was my first sort of introduction to being around a TV show at all. I got to work with 7 or 8 different directors who came in throughout the season and did blocks of episodes. And I think I did. I mean, I know I learned so much from that experience, watching them and watching, recognizing like what the really great directors did differently than the not so great directors, and how they worked with the crew, and how they would drop in, and like some of them could immediately sort of get the crew behind them, rally the crew, and some of them, alienated the crew almost immediately. You're like, okay, I don't want to do that. And I do feel like after that, I felt in my heart, whether I was correct or not, I felt like, I think I could do that. Like I certainly could do it better than that guy, because he didn't do a good job. And here he is getting like lots of money and lots of episodes and has a big career and blah, blah, blah. And so, I don't think I made like too much of a concerted effort towards TV, but I did I took some advice. I mean, We Were Wolves kind of came out of that time to a degree, because I had met with, I don't know, I did a trip to Toronto, met with some agents way before I was ever going to get an agent. But one of them sort of said, if you want to work in TV, you need to make a feature, and thankfully that's not actually really as true now as it used to be. But at the time, it did sort of seem like a necessary kind of step for anyone in TV to take you seriously. They wanted to see that you could do long form, yada, yada. So that was part of the impetus behind like, okay, well, I guess I got to make a feature because Steve, what do you want to do? So I did that, and I did eventually get an agent, and years continued to go by, and I kept feeling like, but I know I could do that. Like give me a shot. Like somebody give me an episode. But it really was like a confluence of things that happened for me to get my first episode of TV. Like there were probably 3 years before I actually got my first episode where I was like focused on it, certain I could do it. We'll see. But it wasn't until like after I had just shot Suck It Up in spring of 2016. And then I was coming back through Toronto, and I got a phone call from my agent saying, this producer, Alana Frank, wants to meet with you, wants to interview you on your layover about a block of or an episode that just opened up on her show. And it opened up because the male director they had to drop out. So they had it all sealed up. But then suddenly they had kind of 2 episodes that opened up. But meanwhile, behind the scenes, I had been, my agents had been pitching me. I had been like, Alana is really the key to me breaking into TV, because Alana also, Peter Mooney, who was in We Were Wolves, had worked on the show with her, and he had been like, hey, Alana, Jordan, and then, I had met her through her daughter randomly because we had gone to Mexico together on this like filmmaking workshop thing. So I feel like I'd been sort of circling Alana like a vulture for a couple of years. And then, luckily this director dropped out, and I don't know, we finally had like a proper interview, and they gave me a shot. And I don't know, it was like the last season of the show. I think they were like, well, how bad can she screw it up? It's like, the show's gonna be over anyway. And so just have fun. And so I got that job, and almost weirdly, kind of the same week, I also got an interview for This Hour Is 22 Minutes, which came from Space Riders, the web series I'd done, that I guess the showrunner had seen and liked. And so within kind of a couple of weeks, I booked like my first 2 TV gigs, which shot kind of back to back that fall. Like I think it was like September, November, December or something. And I was, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot because I had just shot Suck It Up, and I just had this amazing experience shooting that film, and felt very, I don't know, I felt like a kind of well-oiled machine. I had just been on set, just, pulled off a low budget feature in the mountains, and, pulled off all this stuff. And I felt like, okay, well, at least I'm, warmed up for this. And I remember as it was the show I did was called Saving Hope. It was like a hospital ghost drama, and that was the Alana's show. And as I was kind of nearing the start of prep, I kept waiting for my nerves to kick in. I kept every day. I thought I'd wake up and start being, feel that impending sense of dread. And I don't know, it just never came. I started prep, and then, there's obviously a learning curve of how you go through prep on a TV show. But I mean, realistically, anyone who's come out of making an indie film, who's worn 6 different hats and like done the craft services while they're also dressing the set and ADing. Like, you can direct TV, you know, it's in a wonderful way. You just get to focus on directing, which is something that when you come out of indie, rarely you only get to focus on your directing. And so you have this great team of people who are doing all the things you'd normally be worrying about, and you can just kind of focus on, you know, the script and how you want to shoot it and how you want to block it and the story. And I don't know, it went really well. It was, I remember kind of finishing it and feeling like I had this sort of, I don't know if it's, but I had this feeling of like, oh, it's not rocket science. Like, okay, this is a job. It's a set of skills. It's a toolbox. You can get better at it. You can learn. You obviously will need to continue to grow and get better at it. But it is a, you know, you take your experience that you've you know, hauled along behind you for the last 10 or 15 years, and you can apply it to any script that you get. You know, the circumstances change and the budget changes and the scale or the genre changes, but it ultimately comes down to, you know, story and character and blocking and making your days. So it was a encouraging first experience. You know, I think I wasn't set up to fail, which was nice. I felt like I was prepared enough. It was the right time in my career. I think maybe 3 years earlier when I felt all gung-ho and like, somebody give me my first TV job. I don't know if I would have done, I'm sure I wouldn't have done as good a job. I wouldn't have kind of had those 2 features under my belt. I wouldn't have, you know, had all this experience to draw from. So I really do, and have always believed, like, as much impatience as I get and how much I always want to be like way further ahead or been further ahead younger or whatever, there is a natural step-by-step progression, I think, to a career. And sometimes it feels very slow and very frustrating, but everything you do along the way just makes you more prepared for what you're about to dive into. So, you know, I'm grateful for how kind of everything sort of unfolded naturally in the end.
I'm curious also, like, I think of you as a very funny person, just, you know, when you're interacting with others, and obviously there's a lot of humor in all of your work. Is that kind of one of the tools in your toolkit of directing when you're coaxing actors and wrangling people?
Oh, yeah.
Trying on that?
I mean, definitely. I mean, it's a hard look, but working in film is a slog. Like, there's long days. It's very all encompassing. You rarely see anyone outside of the people you're working with. And so if it's not fun, and if you're not laughing and you're not enjoying yourself, like, what is the point? It's too much. It's too hard then. And so, I mean, I think I've always used whatever, I don't know. Since I was a kid, I've always used humor. It's just it's part of my personality. And I do think it is, yeah, it's a great skill because making someone laugh, I think it's just, you make a connection. And then, especially when you find people that you can kind of riff with and banter with, like, it just seals that relationship. And it helps too, like, you know, when things are stressful, I do find, you know, anyone who's kind of seen me direct on TV, like, I have some catchphrases, not that they're like catchphrases I do on purpose, but like, I don't know, I try to keep things sort of fun and light when I can, because I know there's going to be times where it's, you know, I'm going to have to go up to the actor and be like, I'm sorry, we have to do this in 3 minutes. I apologize, but we got to go right now. Thank you. Good. Let's go. But, you know, there's no point in like making anybody miserable or snapping at them or being like gloomy and rude on set. Like, it's an organism, and you have to keep every department running properly. And if one thing gets gummed up in the machine, everything gets gummed up. So I think kind of also, it's not rocket science. We're not saving lives. We're like making a silly TV show, or we're, you know, it's like, you got to kind of be aware that yes, there's tons of money and stakes, and like people are, you know, trying to get, but we're making a TV show. So, you know, let's keep that in perspective. Let's, you know, you can always figure out a way to solve a problem. You know, it might not be what you thought you were going to do. It might not be, you know, the big dream you had, but you can always figure out a way to kind of get through a roadblock. So just, you know, try to not be an asshole.
Great advice for everyone, I think.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about working on Schitts Creek and what it was like to arrive on set and start directing some of those huge stars on that?
Yeah, some of the funniest humans alive. It was, I mean, when I first kind of got, I got an interview for it. I'm trying to even remember. I feel like I was in Halifax. I was in Halifax because I remember, I think I was visiting Adam at the time, and I got the call. My agents were like, "Oh, Schitts Creek wants to interview you," and I was like, "Oh yeah, Schitts Creek. Never watched it." Like I knew what it was. Obviously, this was, you know, before it kind of really blew up. I guess it was probably right before season 4, which I think is really when it went on Netflix and it kind of went cuckoo. But yeah, I mean, the first table read, I went in and Catherine O'Hara was there, and I was just like, it wasn't my block of episodes. I came in and I was just sort of observing and listening, and you know, I knew a couple of the people already. Like I knew Annie a bit, and I knew a couple of the writers, so I didn't feel like a total, you know, loser. But yeah, I mean, Catherine and Eugene are geniuses. They're comedic geniuses. They care so much about the material and the story and making something better and funnier. And they are also just the loveliest people. They have no egos. They're so generous. They're very thoughtful, kind people, which makes working with them and you know, that sort of insane like glimmer of stardom that is on them more, it's not as scary because you know, they're warm and you can go up to them, have a chat with them, and they'll, you know, they'll laugh at your joke, or they'll tell you a story, or you'll just talk about, like, you know, shoot the shit about something. And so it's not like working with you know, what you imagine to be like a big movie star or something where you know, you're scared to talk to them and you have to kind of tiptoe around them. They just really, you know, they just sit around this set, and they're such good friends too. They've worked together forever. And so it's just nice to watch them chat and tell stories. And yeah, it was great. I mean, that show was so fun, and I'm so glad I got to be a part of it, especially as it was, you know, really finding its audience and having its meteoric rise to Schitts Creek craziness by season 6. Yeah.
Cool. And I wanted to ask about Baroness von Sketch too, and kind of was that your first time working? I mean, I know you had done web, but anyway, sorry. It's
okay.
A sketch program. So you're introducing all these new characters, new environment again and again within an episode. Is that a particular kind of a challenge? Was it exciting or frightening, or?
I mean, I had done some sketch on 22, but that is such a different beast on 22 minutes than Baroness. You know, 22 minutes is all studio. It's got, you know, it's very contained compared to Baroness. Baroness is like a 7 wild horses you're trying to like keep from pulling off in all directions, mostly because of the schedule and how ambitious the show was. You know, they wrote so many sketches and we overshot. They always wanted to have more material than they needed. So, you know, they wrote like 400 sketches a season, and we wouldn't shoot all 400, but we would maybe shoot, I don't know, 320 or something. And then what ends up making it into the show is more like 280 or something. So every day was, you know, very challenging. It was a challenging schedule, but so fun, and did have that kind of feeling, you know, of like, I mean, sometimes obviously they were quite, you know, we had, you know, very elaborate ones that needed all sorts of prep, and you'd spend like the whole day working on one. And then sometimes you'd have like 7 tiny little ones that you know, we'd shoot in a cafe, and then we'd run outside and shoot outside the cafe. And then, you know, we'd throw on a different, you know, throw them in a ponytail and different sweater, and be like, okay, we have 10 minutes, set up 2 cameras, let's do the date one, you know. And so that kind of challenge was fun. And it was always a big puzzle. Putting the schedule together was like such a puzzle for that show, and pulling off all of the things on that they did on that show. And yeah, the wardrobe and the makeup and the locations and some of the crazy, you know, art department props builds. But it was always so fun and funny. Like, you know, that is what makes the difference. Even when you're, you know, you're staring at the clock and you're like, we are screwed, how are we going to do this? And then you start shooting it and everybody's laughing at what you're making. It just makes it more pleasant. You know, it helps curb the stress and the unpleasantness of a long day on set.
Do you have a favorite sketch that you directed from Baroness?
Yeah, Placenta is still one of my favorite ones. Yeah, I loved it so much. Yeah, I was really pleased also with how it turned out. I loved the sketch to begin with. And then it just, in execution, I thought turned out really great too.
And I'm curious too, with that program, obviously there's this feminist perspective behind the storylines and the comedy. Did you feel that on set as well?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, the Baronesses, I mean, they were all in their 40s. Some of them had kids, some of them were single moms. It's just like they went into that wanting to make the experience kind of the most pleasant for everyone as well, you know. So they wanted to keep short. I mean, sometimes we went over, but they wanted to keep kind of reasonable hours. We had tons of women working on the show, and yeah, it was definitely a kind of no assholes allowed sort of vibe. And yeah, it was a wonderful working environment. I mean, it was bananas, but it was yeah, one of my fave jobs for sure.
And I was also hoping you could talk a bit about Fraggle Rock and
Sure.
Like direct puppets.
I mean, Fraggle Rock is the best. The Fraggle Rock, I mean, I love it. I had never really directed puppets before. I'd done one tiny little sort of little puppets 11-minute kids episode once, but I was a huge Jim Henson World fan when I was a kid. You know, I watched Labyrinth like once a week, and The Muppets and Sesame Street. Fraggle Rock itself I had seen, but because it was sort of, it only existed in this kind of very small little window of time where it aired, I wasn't actually as familiar with Fraggle Rock as I was with, you know, the rest of kind of the Henson universe. But I remember when my agent wrote me and said, oh, we got a request for, availability for you for this show. This is the code name, but we're pretty sure it's Fraggle Rock. You know, are you wanted to check in case you were like a big fan, you know, whatever. And I wrote back and I was like, oh my God, you know, I have to do this interview. And I went over and above in the interview. I think I have a puppet. He's sitting over there. I brought the puppet out. I felt like I went into a zone. You know, it's like, I do feel like, especially having worked on it now, you know, I think puppets and puppeteers and Henson, it's such a kind of like ingrained part of my childhood that I didn't realize I wanted to be a part of so badly. Mm-hmm. That yeah, once we started talking about it, I don't know, I was pulling out all these ideas. I was like making comparisons and like talking about, you know, things I thought about with Labyrinth and I was like, it's like I went into I don't know, I blacked out or something, and then I came to it and I was like, I think that went good. But yeah, I wanted the job so bad, and I was thrilled when I got it. And then the experience was, I mean, so much even more joyful and wonderful than I could have known. Like, the people working on this show are so talented, you know, top people in the industry, and the creature shop and the puppet wranglers and the puppeteers and the music that's being written and the sets. Like, it's so incredible. Anyway, I'll gush about it all day long. But in terms of like stepping onto the set and working with puppets, yeah, I mean, again, a lot of the same skills and tools that you would bring to any shoot, you bring to this. It's still about, you know, great blocking and coverage and making sure the jokes are landing and finding ways to make something funnier or work better and smoothing things out in the script. And then the things you don't think about are mostly puppet related. The things you kind of assume will be easy, or I don't know, just puppets, you know, for example, like a puppet picking something up is a whole ordeal. You know, it's like if it's written in the script that a puppet walks into a room, picks up a glass of water, goes like this, lays it down and walks out. That's actually very hard to do. Because you have to like see the puppet without the thing of water. Then you have to have a puppet with the thing of water pinned to its hand and do that. And then it has to lay it down. And that's just like a dumb example, but little things like that, where with a human being acting, you would obviously never think about that being an issue. You learn pretty quickly, like, oh, okay, we can't do that in one shot. That's 3 shots. You know, you have to have an edit, or you have to have a second hand under the frame that then comes up with the water glass and then goes back down, then the other hand comes up. But you learn that stuff pretty quickly, and then you can start to kind of go through the scripts and see, you know, what I would say, like the red flags. It's like, okay, this little line is like really actually going to take us 5 hours to do. Is there a simpler way? And then you can talk to the puppeteers, and they're so creative and generous and like always have 15 different great ideas of, you know, either how to simplify it or how to pull something off, because they will always want to pull it off. They're always trying to push what puppets can do and try to sort of keep that magic, you know, of what is possible to see a puppet do on screen. So you really just like, it's this extremely collaborative, creative environment, because everybody cares so much about the show and the world and just wants it to be the best it can be.
So it's a show that's, you know, has appeal for everyone, but is maybe geared primarily toward children. And I was wondering if that was different for you.
Yeah, I mean, I've never done, other than that one little like mini puppet episode I did years and years ago, I've never worked in kids TV. But this is more family. It's geared towards family, and also because it's Henson and the nostalgia of it and the creative challenges of it. It doesn't feel there's anything wrong with kids TV. I've just never worked in it before, so I don't really know how it compares to working, you know, on a show that's fully geared for children and maybe has a lot of children in it. Definitely working with adults with puppets is, I think, maybe easier than working with a lot of kids. So yeah.
So I'm curious what you're working on now or excited to work on next.
Yeah. Well, this year I got to do a pretty cool job. I did an episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which was kind of an amazing experience. And I'm excited for that to come out. That'll come out next year. I think they're still in like full VFX mode, but I'm really excited for that and being part of that world. And I would love to keep working in the kind of Star Trek universe a bit. I loved that. I've got yeah, I've got like a show that I've been developing with Henson that, who knows, hopefully that would be great if that actually went. And then, yeah, just still trying to make, still trying to make my feature or a feature, or I have, a project I've been working on for more than a decade that I love dearly, and still, have hopes we'll be able to make it in the next couple of years now that the pandemic is over and seems like things are slightly normalizing in terms of budgets and stuff. But I'm just excited to keep trying new shows, like, doing Star Trek, doing Fraggle. I'd love to do something, I'd love to do like a Marvel show or like a superhero type show. I want to keep trying new challenges, and I got a taste of a big budget with Star Trek in terms of what that means for the amount of days you have to shoot something. And it really, I feel a little spoiled by it now, because when you have more time, obviously you can do cooler stuff and try new things. And I'd like to keep working on bigger shows that kind of have the resources to give their directors, a little more time to make something really cool.
Well, thank you so much. It's so inspiring to hear someone talk about, being excited to stretch in all these directions as an artist, which you've been doing and mastering them. So thanks, Jordan.
Thanks. Well, thanks, Eva. It's so nice to talk to you.